Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim Marriage Podcast, where we talk about healthy relationships from a Muslim lens. I'm Zahra Hassan.
And I'm AJ, and we've been married for 2.5 years.
And let's get started.
Let's get started.
On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about being bored in marriage. So let's just address this right off the top. Are you bored in this marriage?
Sorry, what was that? I wasn't listening.
Okay, so seriously, are you bored in this marriage?
No, it's actually very fun. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that. This is actually a very real concern that I hear from clients. I see on social media. It's a really important phenomenon that I think we need to go through, of people feeling disconnected from their partners after they're married.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the best way to sort of go through this topic is to use an actual example, right? So I went through social media and found a question where somebody was asking about exactly this. So we will address it by addressing this brother's question.
I'm going to be very judgmental.
All right, that seems healthy.
Oh, I'm very healthy, peak condition.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so let's get started. It's titled Bored in My Marriage. So the brother asks, is it normal to be married but not really talk or have a bond? My wife, who's 27, and I'm 28, have been married for 2 years. Like, I can't really say my wife is my best friend. I would like to have a closer bond with her, but she prefers to always be to herself. We bump heads sometimes like normal spouses and joke around sometimes, rarely. However, we're just so distant. She comes from work, changes, and immediately she's on her phone watching shows. I learned to mind my own business and consume myself in playing games once I saw that she doesn't prioritize time with me, and when I bring it up, it's like pulling teeth with her. I can't keep hounding someone to spend time with me or to get to know me better, and I feel like I've been doing that since we got married. Advice, or is this normal? And P.S., before we got married, the connection and bond was there. So what do you think is going on in this situation?
I don't know. It seems to me that they didn't involve the family in the talking stage very much with regards to, like, for me, when I was younger, living with my family,
Yeah.
I am just like her, right?
Yeah.
I charge my social battery just being in the room by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's been a constant.
Yeah.
It's not been different ever, right? So if my family, right, knew about that aspect of me, then they would know that a person who's like super outgoing and like always looking for attention might not be a good fit, right? It might be an incompatibility. Of course, they might actually get excited about that idea. They'll be like, we found someone to help pull them out of the room.
Yeah.
Right? But at least that's something that they could bring up to the other party, the interested party.
Okay.
To understand that, right? Because what he said was while they were in the talking stage, they were not like that. They were both outgoing and outreaching to each other.
Yeah.
And of course, during the talking stage, people are going to present the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
There's going to be some untruths involved, right?
Of course.
And that's just because usually they're afraid of being judged for themselves. Like, why would I, who is always in the room by myself, just recharging my battery and just doing my own thing?
Yeah, like after work, after school, and all those things. Yeah.
They're like, how could I possibly attract a potential spouse if they already know that about me? So I'm going to have to make the effort to go and present myself as outgoing and fun and bubbly and lovable, right?
Yeah.
But then once you guys get married, right, that's when the true self comes out. And that's why I think involving the family during the talking stage
Yeah.
is so crucial,
Yeah.
because it's the family that knows you. And you literally are choosing to ignore someone that has the most knowledge about your potential spouse.
To be fair, the brother here, he didn't like. We can't really make assumptions about how his talking stage went, right?
Mm.
Um, we're just gonna assume. It's safe to assume that his parents were probably involved, right?
I already said I was going to be super judgmental.
Okay. All right. So, assuming that his parents were involved, you're right. Sometimes this is an issue of basic compatibility, but even when compatibility is somewhat controlled for, when people do their best and it feels like they're really compatible during the talking stage, which is what I think happened here. And that's why he added that PS saying that that connection was there, right? And then they get married and now you're in the same house with this other human being who had this different upbringing from you. A lot of it's like we said on previous podcasts, whatever it is that happened during the talking stage, honestly, most of it goes out the window, and you're now dealing with everything from square one, right? Because you are now dealing with each other all the time, 24/7. What I think that happened here is that marriage, when you are married, even in the very beginning, they've only been married 2 years, but even from the very beginning, it's important to establish routines that will maintain this connection. Because if you just leave it up to passively, like we sort of do in in the talking stage, whenever you're interested in somebody, you have to let them know by being consistent, by wanting to communicate and talk to them, by putting in consistent effort. That doesn't go away when you get married. In fact, you have to do that so much more, right? I think you remember you and I had this conversation a couple of times in our first year,
Mm.
where I was noticing that things were slightly shifting away from the way it was when we first got married, right? Because when you first got married, a lot of that same effort was there from both of us on trying to maintain and build upon that connection. Because when you first get married, you're very excited, right?
Yeah.
And then with life and responsibilities start to come into the picture, and then each one of us starts to revert back to our own baseline of, like you said, recharging away from each other and just being so consumed with life responsibilities that we somehow assumed that the bond would take care of itself, and that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that shift quite a few times, and so we have to come back together and sit down and have this conversation quite a few times.
Yeah.
Do you remember how those went?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They went really well. They were very productive.
Yeah.
They were boring.
I guess they were. Were they? I think. Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. It's just on theme.
Yeah, but so like I remember, for example, alhamdulillah, we're both very blessed that we can work from home.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, I think that's a huge blessing. But when we were first married, we would do this corny thing where we would spend like lunchtime with each other.
True.
Right. And then over time, that sort of went away. And I started noticing that we both work very long hours, but at the end of our hours, we would then come back and just see each other at nighttime before going to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what happens now,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it doesn't feel disconnected in the way that it did before.
Yeah.
Because we do a lot of things to try to maintain that connection during the day in a very conscious way on purpose.
We're intricately connected.
Okay, all right. But it's in an active, you have to address the issue in an active way.
Yep.
So for in this example of specifically this brother and this sister, if they were my clients and they were sitting down with me, and I've had this conversation many times with clients in similar situations, I would say this is an issue, number one, of having a good conflict resolution routine in place so that you have space to talk about this, because he said that he tried to speak about this to her, but the information really wasn't landing. Right, and that means that there's a lot of room for improvement for how they handle conflicts like this one, right? So we would first work on how you're supposed to have that conflict resolution, and we talked about that in some detail in our second episode, the first year of marriage. So I would recommend for somebody struggling with that to go back to that episode. The second thing is we would talk about specifically how to address this issue during your discussions when you're trying to resolve it in the conflict resolution, right? He would have to do a little bit of introspection and speak about his experience of what it feels like to be this disconnected.
It don't feel good.
Not at all, right? And the assumption that we have with our spouses, which is a part of good conflict resolution, is that they're not doing the thing intentionally. They just don't have the information that they need to understand how it's actually affecting you, right? So in your job as the one with the problem, or the one with the issue who is being affected negatively, is to communicate how it's been affecting you. What's your experience? So if it were me and it was us when we were having this conversation, I remember I explained, I said, when we were in our talking stage, or when we were first married, I felt really connected, right? But right now I understand it's because of, you're working really hard, and we're working really hard to establish ourselves after being married, and to build that financial foundation for our future, inshallah. But it still made me feel a little bit abandoned.
Lonely.
Yeah, lonely, perfect. It made me feel a little bit lonely, right? And I could see that if we continue on this trajectory, that feeling is only going to get worse and worse and worse. And then it made me honestly feel a little bit sad. And even though we're in the same house, that I would feel like that I would be missing you.
Yeah.
Right. So for the brother to try to understand how he's really feeling, right? And this requires vulnerability. That's why when they say it's hard being married and you have to do work, this is what they mean. So it's going to require vulnerability and honesty with yourself about how it's genuinely making you feel. And then that's how you have that conversation. And then your wife will hear you out and then she will talk about her experience. First of all, she'll mention whether or not she understood you, and then talk about her experience, and then you talk about what your needs are in the solution, right? You go through the steps in conflict resolution. I think that the connection that is in between in a relationship, in this case between a married couple, is not a passive thing. It requires a lot of active and a deliberate daily effort, right? And I carry within me, and I'm sure you do the same, and I've heard this many times from clients who are in happy, healthy relationships. I have this like barometer within me of where we are at in terms of connection, right? Because when dealing with this world and all of the challenges it brings, whether they're and all the very long list of challenges that you have to navigate, the most important asset that you have to be able to deal with all that is the relationship that you have with your spouse. It's important that you are, in the same way that you would be investing in building your business on a daily basis, you have to also invest in your marriage on a daily basis in order to make sure that asset remains healthy.
It's literally very financial.
Yeah.
You spoke about barometer.
Yeah.
Right, with regards to
connection.
Yeah, the literal status of the marriage.
Yes.
I myself have a meter just like that.
Okay.
But I use former black presidents.
Barackometer.
I got a Barack meter.
I knew it. All right, that's actually pretty good. I like that. But Do you have a similar, like, are you as conscious as I am of?
Oh yeah, I've got a similar Barack meter for sure.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why are you
In a
laughing?
no, in a serious way.
Just Barack has been serious.
Okay, all right.
It's one of the most serious presidents I've ever known.
Okay.
So this meter that I have, it literally is the opposite of my battery charge.
Okay.
I realize the more my battery is charged, the worse off I'm doing.
Like if you're
I
very
realize
happy, that I might be miserable.
I'm surprisingly rested.
Yeah.
I'm not doing enough. So then I kick my butt into gear and I stop neglecting you.
Okay, so if I had just let it go and we didn't have those conversations,
Mm-hmm.
what would our relationship look like?
Um, I would be very selfish.
Okay.
That's my natural state, is to be selfish.
Okay, so that we would just, never see each other?
No, we would see each other.
Yeah.
Like for me, when I was younger, and my entire family played soccer,
Yeah.
and I was the only one that liked basketball.
Yeah.
So I just used to stay home
Yeah.
when they were going out to play soccer.
Yeah.
So I became very self-sufficient very fast.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right? Like that you don't that connection is not as vital to your well-being as it is to me.
Yeah, like I don't push for social connections,
Yeah.
right? Like I love you dearly
Mm-hmm.
and I love spending time with you,
Yeah.
right? But for me, it's always just been me,
Okay. So
just being alone. So the marriage, it's always been something that I have to get used to, being around other person,
okay.
right? And having to be your best friend.
It sounds exhausting.
Well, you've seen in the first episode, it's very rewarding.
Oh, okay. I'm glad. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad.
Inshallah, I get to spend the rest of my life with you, and inshallah, we get to spend eternity
In Jannah.
together.
Okay, my apologies. There's going to be a lot of one-on-one time, inshallah.
Well, hold on, real quick. Inshallah, I'm gonna be using up 40 years of your time just staring at you.
Okay, all right.
So
Okay,
I feel like it's an even trade-off.
inshallah. But the important point here, I think that you brought up, right, is that there is that mismatch in terms of what you are comfortable with, in terms of this. Whenever it comes to being bored in marriage, it's an issue around emotional intimacy, right? So what you are comfortable with in terms of emotional intimacy is different from what it is that I'm comfortable with.
Oh no, I'm very comfortable with emotional intimacy.
I understand, but I'm saying is that that you require less
Social batteries, what
yes.
you're talking about. Yeah.
you require less quality time than I do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That you were comfortable, like if there was a number to it, that you're comfortable with maybe 15% in order to feel okay. And I would need maybe 45, 50, 60% to feel okay before that like warning light starts to go off, right?
Yeah.
So there is that mismatch.
A lot of it, I think, has to do with how guys generally are raised.
Yeah, I really think that is probably part of the equation, right?
Yeah.
And the different ways that men are socialized differently from women as they're growing up, and of course this is a generalization, right?
Well, they say men don't cry.
Okay.
Right?
Men
and
are
an
humans,
extension
men
of
are
that.
cry. Yeah.
Well, no, they say men don't cry. Like they're not. I'm not saying like scientifically men can't cry. I'm saying they say men should not cry.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Which I disagree with.
Of course.
One of the best people in existence used to cry constantly.
Yes.
Right?
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
And when it comes to this standard of men that we have in this day and age, weakness, emotional weakness, like if you try to bond with your friend and explain, right, it might weird out your friends. They might be like, I don't know, man. They just move on, right?
Yes.
And I think women have that advantage in that they can vent to their friends and it just be completely acceptable.
Yeah, it's whenever somebody goes to see a therapist, a counselor, somebody for mental health, right? One of the factors that's taken into account is their access to social support, right?
Yeah.
Because social support is very protective. And when again, really don't like to make huge generalizations, but in this case, a huge generalization is that women are more often made to feel that it's okay to access the social support, and we get used to
Help.
it. Yes, exactly, and we get used to it, and because it's available to us, and we know how beneficial it is. It becomes a part of a part of our ingredients for general well-being, so that without the social support, it's like I need it. So for example, somebody who exercises regularly, right, works
Yeah.
out regularly, this person starts to understand the benefits that it has for their energy and overall well-being, and when they go 2-3 days without going to the gym, it affects them negatively.
They feel it.
Yeah, so in that same way, again, huge generalization, you would find that women more often are in need of more consistent access to connection than men. A third time, again, huge generalization. But I understand what you're saying, and I agree with that, because it is true that more often, whenever I have clients that are couples, it is the woman who requires more connection than the man. It's not true in this case, this specific example, and that's part of why I chose this example, where it's the brother who is requiring more connection.
Yeah.
Right? The numbers are probably closer to 50-50, but those dynamics exist. But what is true almost 100% of the time is that one partner requires more connection than the other. This
True.
is,
I mean, that's a given.
yeah, like it's very rare that somebody is able to find compatibility so perfect that it's just like, cool, we're on the same page. You don't have to do anything. Passively, everything will just work out.
You're just as compatible as I am.
Exactly. You're just the other side of the coin.
High five.
So so every single time when you're in that house together, you're going to find that one of you is going to be more comfortable with less connection than the other. And you can use it this is why it's so important to have that conflict resolution routine in place, because many times this will be the first conflict you're going to have to deal with, of how to resolve that, of how to make your partner understand that I just need more connection than you do. Otherwise, I start to it starts to affect my well-being. Things like resentment start to build.
You want to find a middle ground.
Yeah, that's how you find that middle ground through the conflict resolution.
Yeah.
The way that you and I found a middle ground when you have that conversation is at the very end of that discussion. The second last step is when the person states their needs, right?
Yeah.
So in my case, I was the one who needed more connection than you. So I stated my need as, I'm going to need for you to come and see me at least a few times during the day.
Yeah.
Like unprompted.
Yeah.
And alhamdulillah, you've been doing that.
I have?
Yeah, you have. It's been fine.
I have?
Yes, you have.
That's legitimately a shock to me that I have.
Yeah, at least a few times a day, you come out, because you are here in your office. This is where you work. This is where you do all the things. But you specifically come out to come and see me at least a few times a day, and that means a lot to me. And maybe once a week, especially when you see like that I'm feeling really tired, you say, okay, let's go out somewhere.
I've been pushing for that a lot.
Yeah, you say let's go out somewhere, and then where you and I can just go and just have a minute to be out, to the two of us, right? And that has also helped me a lot. And if we didn't have that conversation in the beginning of our marriage, and we didn't address it specifically to put those bounds, those measures in place that would mitigate the gap between your need and my need for connection, right? This would have been a much more difficult conversation to have now, because the one of the things that people underestimate, they underestimate within themselves, is how important their emotional needs are to them. Like, if you could imagine, what the first place where our emotional needs are met are with our original caregivers, and for many people that's their parents. So you have a specific type of relationship with your parents. Now imagine, subhanallah, that something happened, your parents got upset with you, and they are now started to withdraw.
They no longer play peekaboo with you.
Yeah.
What? This is a serious conversation.
It's so serious. But they started to withdraw some of that affection, right? In a way that you could feel it. That would be very upsetting for most people, because it would
be heartbreaking.
Yeah, because it would start to touch on some really, because whenever somebody does something, especially someone close to us, whether it's a parent or a sibling or a spouse, what we tend to do is we assume their intentions according to our core wounds that are already there.
Yeah.
So if a parent starts to withdraw their affection, right, then you start making assumptions of, well, it must be because I'm not a good person, if that's what your wound is. Or it must be because I'm not worthy of staying for, if you have that abandonment wound, or whatever wound is already there. You're going to come to a conclusion that, yes, this confirms that wound. And that's why it hurts so much. So when you get married and you are with your spouse, who is honestly a stranger in the beginning, and they start backing away from you, it will, again, you're going to start coming to conclusions based on whatever wound was already present. And because of that pain that exists, and you get a little bit frustrated that this pain is here because of you, right?
Oh yeah.
I didn't have this pain until I married you.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of the conversation when this goes unaddressed for a long period of time, for months or even years, you start coming to the conclusion of, well, why did you even marry me if you're not interested in me? And that's what you start to think.
That's literally, it's a spiral of death.
Exactly. Spiral is a perfect word. You start to spiral going down that direction, and what happens with that? You build resentment.
Yeah.
And resentment is like rust. Yeah. It's like rust in marriage, right?
Literally.
Yeah, because like as soon as you start to feel that resentment starting to build, if you are newly married or you're happily married, be very conscious of that. Whatever it is that's causing that resentment needs to have to be resolved immediately with a sit-down conversation. Because if you leave it alone, you can call it the shaitan, call it waswasa, whatever you want to call it, that will inevitably grow, lead to things like contempt or one of the other horsemen of divorce. But it's like rust. It destroys. That's what destroys marriages, is resentment. Yeah. So it's to answer this brother's question of when he says, how do I address this? Number one, establish a good conflict resolution routine. Like, I would even put that whole issue of connection aside and just sit down with his wife and say, hey, I would really like to work on our communication skills. And then you go through the concept that we discussed in that episode, the second episode, First Year of Marriage, where you establish a safe space that the two of you agree upon, right? You go through and review for yourselves what are the different steps of the discussion, what are the 5 steps. If you need to, write down those steps and put them on the wall in your safe space where you can easily see them. So it's going to feel awkward in the beginning.
Marriage is not supposed to be something that's just natural. There are rules that you have to follow. And
many, you can go through it the way that many people do, trial and error, right? But inshallah, the whole point of this podcast is to save you a lot of that, to trial and error phase, and just tell you this is what works. Right? This is what works. So I would write down those steps, put it down somewhere visible, accept the fact that it's going to feel awkward. If you remember, it felt awkward for us in the beginning. It's going to feel awkward and unnatural to be going through these steps, right? But with practice, it starts to become routine. That's why I call it a conflict resolution routine.
Yeah.
And it becomes a real asset that you have to fall back on when your emotions take over.
Yeah.
Because when your emotions take over and you are activated and your amygdala starts to become in charge, it starts to hijack away the executive functioning skills, the things in the frontal lobe, and you stop doing things like remembering, right?
You're no longer thinking like a CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. You will have a harder time remembering what are those steps. It needs to be reflexive.
Yeah.
Like, as an example, like a little bit of a tangent. If you remember a few days ago, I don't even remember what the issue was, but there was an issue that was a big deal in our household. And it became it started to spiral pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like there were a lot of big emotions involved on both ends, from your side and from my side, right? And Alhamdulillah, that was a day when I was really, really, really glad that you and I had that routine to fall back on. Yeah, that routine.
We executed it almost flawlessly.
That's very generous, Jazakallah khair. But that it's important to have that in place when you need it the most, right? And these fights or these conflicts that come up early in a marriage, for especially this one of disconnection, are a really good opportunity to practice using it.
Yeah.
So for the brother, establish that with your wife.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that you do is specifically reflect on what your experience is, and then use your experience to communicate that to her using the steps that were outlined. That's how I would address it for this brother. Yeah.
And I think conflict resolution routines,
yes,
they can turn a downward spiral into an upward spiral.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, you have ice cream.
Okay. All right. That's a
wonderful ice cream cone right there.
I mean, somebody's gonna be screaming.
You can probably get a chocolate with swirl or a mixed or a vanilla swirl.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Share it with your wife.
Okay. Another solution.
Yeah, just don't let her take too much.
Okay.
It's your ice cream. You bought it.
Okay.
You need to remember that.
That feels very specific.
What do you mean?
I keep taking your ice cream. That's another opportunity for discussion that we will get to, inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go through a second example. This one is a little bit longer, and this time it's coming from the point of view of a woman.
Very rare.
Okay.
Very rare. We don't see many women on the internet these days.
Okay.
Never. Not since the incident.
I can't tell you're being serious.
Not since the incident.
Okay, so for this sister, and again, it's very important that we don't judge any of the brothers or sisters who are asking for help on the internet, right? Our intention is to genuinely try to help them.
I'm going to be very judgmental.
Okay, and to empathize as much as we can with their circumstances, because it takes a lot to to be in enough pain that you're willing to be vulnerable in front of strangers.
I'm going to be emphatically judgmental.
I'm just going to interrupt you the whole time.
I'm going to empathize so much.
Oh, empathic? Oh, emphatically.
I'm going to be so empathetical.
Okay, there we go. All right, so this sister, it's titled "Made the Wrong Choice." Right? She says, "I'm married with a child for 4 years now, and every once in a while, I remember someone who I was in a talking stage with. He was a year younger than me, but the connection was out of this world." She says, "I sabotaged it as I was not used to such a secure and normal attachment and craved dysfunction subconsciously. Knowing what I know now from therapy, I can see my current marriage happened out of a trauma response. Even if I would be divorced and had the opportunity to get in contact with him, I wouldn't take it further if he wanted to, because I don't believe he deserves to marry damaged goods like me, especially since my current husband is an excellent father and would want to be involved at least 50%. It's just not an ideal situation. Are there any mature married women stuck in my kind of situation? How do you deal and find happiness in the day-to-day now that you've mostly healed from the CPTSD? And you know, if you were healed, you would not have made that choice. I don't see any point in getting divorced, as I don't believe in marriage after divorce if you have children and the children's father is very insistent, active in their lives. It's different if the father has nothing, wants nothing to do with them, or is abusive, then by all means go for it. But right now, my husband provides. He is not abusive and he's a good father. We do have some problems, mostly in-laws related, and his own trauma and lack of appreciation. But I knew this going in, and I still made the heartbreaking and permanent choice I can't take back. How do you cope with the heartache and find solace while balancing motherhood, housework, and work, especially when you're missing the communication and love that you long for? And for those of you who are going to comment about striving for these things with my current husband, it is not possible, simply because he is not as cultured, doesn't like to read, does not enjoy the conversation, and lacks the insight that the other man had.
Okay, so
What do you think is going on here?
first of all, she describes herself as damaged goods
Yeah.
while she's actively in a marriage, right?
Yeah.
So she thinks that the marriage has damaged her. Or perhaps she's thinking about if she were to divorce the guy, that she would be damaged,
Yeah.
right? Which I disagree with, you know? Like, being married in the halal sense isn't damaging anyone, you know?
Yeah.
Especially because you got a child now,
Mm-hmm.
and Allahu Alam, the child is going to be born, and the child is going to be loved, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't see how you could retain damage from a child being born, a child that you can love.
I think what she's saying is that she was damaged goods before she was married.
Well, no, because
she was pointing to the fact that she grew up from a dysfunctional family, and that she had CPTSD, and that
well, if I recall what she said, though, is like she said, I had a real chance at marrying him,
yeah,
and I sabotaged it. And then she said, now, even if I were to divorce him, I don't think he would want to marry me because I'm damaged goods. So she doesn't see herself as damaged goods when she was first talking with him.
Okay.
Because he was interested in marrying her, but she says, I'm the one that sabotaged him.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
And also she called the dude, her husband.
Yeah.
She called him a wonderful father, but he dumb.
Okay. Yeah, there's a little bit of resentment there.
Yeah.
But I think she was also trying to paint an accurate picture of what her experience is.
Yeah, well, I agree with the wording that you used.
Yeah.
An accurate picture of her experience.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't think it's an accurate picture bar none.
No, it's not. It's not, because I'm gonna, again, I've never sat down or spoken with a sister. So this is gonna have a lot of heavy assumptions, right? But the reason why I chose this particular question is that generally it fits in with the dynamic that sometimes men or women have, right? Where they are, because of that lack of connection, and notice that they've been married a little bit longer.
Yeah.
That first marriage, they were married for 2 years.
Yeah.
And this marriage, it's now 4 years.
Yeah.
That's an additional 2 years of a lack of connection, right? That's 600 and something days.
Quick maths.
Yeah, right. It's 700 days, right? So it's that's a lot of time for resentment to build up, and you can start to see the effects of that resentment in the language that the individual uses to speak about their spouse.
Of course.
In the first example, it was pretty generous, where he was mostly focused on his own experience. Well, he wasn't really blaming his wife.
Yeah.
He was just saying that this situation is just very difficult for me.
Yeah.
Whereas in the second example, because there's more time, again, like,
seems like there is a dislike.
Yeah, I'm just using this as an example to illustrate some points. Everything that I'm saying could be 100% not true. So these are
disclaimer.
Yeah, heavy assumptions for the sister. If anything, my heart goes out to the sister. It sounds like a very painful situation to be in. I can understand that level of loneliness. I was there in my first marriage, right? So I agree.
I think that loneliness has to do with they didn't set up any communication routines.
Exactly. Right? So
Oh, is that where you were going with
yeah,
that?
yeah, that's exactly.
Word?
Because if you let the situation continue and you let the situation fester, right? And or continue to rust, that resentment starts to come in and grow and grow and grow.
Yeah.
And if resentment starts to grow enough, then you now start to enter the places of, for example, being very critical. So in John Gottman, when he was discussing the four horsemen of divorce, let's talk a little bit about what those are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you will notice that the four of them, they are two and two. That's the way that I've understood them. There are two and two, and each of the individuals in a pair of two are sort of playing off of each other. They're playing off of each other.
How many people are this? 2 people?
No, I think that the each pair, like you have a pair and then
Yeah.
a second pair, and each pair represents a more severe outcome from the initial pair. It's hard to, just with that disclaimer, let me explain and inshallah become more clear.
Pair in what regard? A pair of people or
No.
a pair of...
A pair of factors.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
A pair of factors.
Okay, so you got a pair of factors, and each pair is more severe than the other.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So if you have, so let's talk about the first two. The first two being criticism and defensiveness. Okay? So in the dynamics of a marriage, when that resentment builds, there will be one person who's more resentful.
One person is more critical?
Yes. And that person who is more resentful will start to become critical. And when they are critical of their spouse, what does their spouse do? They start to become defensive. Defensive.
They
right?
start to sneak around.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
What?
But they start to be defensive.
All right.
So what that'll look like is that you'll just be in your regular day to day, and no matter what happens, no matter what is said, like a free pizza could show up at the door. The critical spouse will somehow find a way to criticize the spouse about that. Be like, you know what? That reminds me of all the times you didn't buy pizza. Right?
Why would you get pineapple and mushrooms?
Okay. Right? But you see the point that they will find a way to be critical because that's what's on their mind, right? And then after being criticized for a certain amount of time, that their spouse starts to become defensive. Defensive unnecessarily. Yeah. So that conversation will be a pizza might show up at the door, and the defensive spouse might just say, you know, I didn't order this. This wasn't me who ordered this. I'm not the one.
Darla, I didn't order this. Darla.
Yes.
It's not me.
Okay.
Did you buy this? Because I didn't.
All right. So unprompted, they will start to become very, lack of a better word, defensive, right? Yeah. And you see that it's very clear whenever you're talking to a couple with this dynamic. Yeah. Now, this might not be the way that was intended, but the way that I understand these four horsemen is that as time goes on, the criticism will turn into contempt.
Oh no, absolutely.
So that we'll call that the third horseman, right?
What's the third horseman? Contempt.
Contempt, right? And when you have one partner who's contempt, the difference between criticism and contempt is if they hate you.
Contempt is they're not trying to improve you. Criticism, there is a chance of them trying to improve you. Yeah. But contempt is like, I don't care for you.
I think one is just a more severe version of the other. Criticism is
I don't know. What is it?
Criticism is what it sounds like. It's more of an action, right? Yeah. Whereas contempt is more of a feeling.
Yeah. But I think that criticism has a chance of being positive, right? Yeah. Like, oh, I love that golf swing. Yeah. But you're doing this wrong. Yeah. Perhaps do it this way. Yeah. They're trying to improve you. Yeah, no. But contempt is like, get off my golf course. No one invited you.
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? But these are concepts that were already defined and heavily outlined,
by
right?
Mr. Gottman.
Yes. So we're just reviewing them in a quick way to
Mm,
illustrate how dangerous resentment is. Okay. So if one spouse is now starting to be contemptuous, then the other spouse moves on from being defensive to now straight up stonewalling. Stonewalling. And what stonewalling is, I'm just gonna pretend you're not there.
yeah,
Right? So it's like the silent treatment but more severe.
yeah,
So that every time you try to address an issue or talk to this person
hmm
in a as a defensive posture, they just make themselves emotionally and just unavailable
yeah,
for the criticism, for the contempt, for whatever it is that's been going on. So the underlying issue for all these dynamics is resentment.
I agree.
So the first step into these dynamics is criticism. So
Mhm.
in the description of the sister of her situation, you can see how it's different from his situation, and the difference there is time is an additional 2 years. And over that 2 years of more resentment building, you can see that one spouse is now starting to be critical of the other spouse,
Yeah.
right? She's careful to point out the fact that he's a good father, he's a good provider, and he does all of these things. But this issue is very important to her of feeling emotionally connected to her spouse, and that just has not happened.
What's strange is that she's already settled upon
Yes,
the divorce happening.
she has settled upon, she has resigned herself that she's not going to consider divorce for the sake of her child.
Mm.
Right, she's outlined all of the reasons, saying for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason, divorce is not possible. I'm not going to consider that. So given that there is no connection here,
Problem is that
yeah,
in talking about it, she's already considering it. I think she's saying I'm not going to consider it, but she's already considered it. I think she's saying I'm not going to choose it.
yes, exactly, right? So yeah, that's exactly what happened. So she's saying, given that divorce is not an option for me, how do I handle being lonely in a relationship? The only, like, only she knows her situation better than I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
4 years is a decent amount of time to get to know a person and really try the different avenues.
Yeah.
It sounds like she has gone to therapy on her own, right? So at this point, the only advice that makes any sense is to have professional help,
Mm-hmm.
right? A professional third party to sit down and give you an avenue and tools where you can communicate to each other in a way that you can hear each other. Because the problem with resentment, right, and the problem with criticism is the person can no longer hear you in an objective way.
Yeah.
They're hearing you with you speak to hurt me.
Yeah.
So everything that you're saying starts to be heard through that cloud of hurt and pain.
Yeah.
They can't hear you. And for her being this lonely this long, that feeling, that resentment is going to make it difficult for her to hear back what her husband says.
What's
Right.
the opposite of rose-tinted glasses?
Whatever these individuals are wearing. Right?
Hey.
Yeah, because like I know that because that's how it was in my first marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the first marriage, there was this very powerful lack of connection for the reasons we outlined in the last episode. But I understand that feeling of just honestly feeling like, why did you marry me?
Mm-hmm.
If just to reject me, right? And I get it. It's a different type of loneliness, because when you are lonely and you're single, at least you're free to go and find somebody who will help, who can mitigate that loneliness, somebody you're compatible with. But when you're lonely and you're married, it's a different type because you're trapped.
Yeah.
It's that feeling of being trapped, and that it is going to turn towards your partner of, why are you trapping me, right?
Yeah.
So that's where that resentment is
I
coming
think
from.
some marriages are due to social pressures.
Yeah, definitely. We went through all the different reasons, wrong reasons to marry somebody,
Mm-hmm.
right? The wrong reasons. And remember when we talked about one of the wrong reasons to marry someone is according to your core wounds,
Yeah.
which is what I think happened here because she said that she married according to her traumas,
Yeah.
right? And when you do that, what happens is that you are likely to choose somebody who is at best incompatible, which is what happened here,
Mm-hmm.
or at worst abusive. Thank God that didn't happen here, right?
Good.
So the problem is when you are married, it's different. You can't just walk away. And that's the decision she's made. So you're going to have to bridge the gap between that incompatibility. I suspect that there's a difference here in attachment styles.
Do you think it possible
Yeah.
that she fell in love with the lie with regards to the other dude? Because in the first example we had,
Yeah.
the guy said at the very beginning we were very compatible, everything was great,
Yeah.
and then things started to die down. Maybe she would be feeling the other way around if she stuck with that guy, and like now she's like, I just got hoodwinked.
Oh, I think I'm really glad that you brought up because what I think is happening here, and I see it happen a lot, is when you are in that place of pain and loneliness, and whatever
Grass
other
is greener.
yes, the and whatever other core wounds exist. So common one is rejection, right? So that feeling of being powerfully rejected by your spouse. In order to deal with the pain, subconsciously you go back to the last place you felt accepted, and that's almost always an ex, right?
True.
So this happens to be that ex,
Which is ironic because the ex eventually said no.
yeah. Whatever happened.
Oh, what's wrong with your face?
Okay, that could have happened to. That could have. It sounds like actually she walked away from him, right? But the important thing is that it's an ex. That's the last place that people felt validated. Is that last relationship? That last.
Not for me. For me, it was ice cream.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Is that last intimate relationship that they had. And what they tend to do, what people, human beings, and this is a human being thing, is that we will now reflect on all the good aspects of that relationship, on all the good feelings, and minimize anything negative that was there.
Mm-hmm.
So and we will do this so often, especially after 4 years. If you do this often enough, you get to a point that you no longer have an accurate depiction of what that relationship was like, right?
True.
So there is a good chance, and I'm not saying for this sister, but I'm saying for sisters who find themselves in this situation, or brothers who find themselves in this situation, consider the fact that there is a good chance that if you were to go back to that time and just observe that relationship, you'd be like, you know what, it wasn't as great as I thought it was. Right? It's not what I thought it was going to be.
There is some danger to that thought process, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't mean to stonewall your point.
Okay.
If people had that mentality and mindset consistently, every single person would most likely only have one child.
Yeah. Why?
Because if they remember the pain, they'd be like, I'm never having another kid. No. But I think it is part of the process of survival to forget the bad things.
Yeah. The problem is that we forget it from a conscious place. But subconsciously, the body keeps the score. Like your body remembers.
Like it makes sense because when you get pregnant, you're like, no, it hurts.
Yes.
You're going to remember. Now, of course, I am not in that position.
Alhamdulillah.
But I feel like I can mimic the pain, you know? Like if you take away my fan, you know, like I'd probably be feeling the same type of pain as pregnant women.
It's definitely comparable.
It would be very uncomfortably warm in the room.
It's proportionate. It's exactly the same.
It's exactly the same.
Okay.
There's no difference.
Or so just if we go back to the example here with this sister, right? And for people who are in this situation, it's sort of like the phenomenon where if I ask an individual, tell me about what your grades were like in elementary school, right? I think they've done studies where they found out that people tend to overestimate what their grades were like when they were much younger in elementary school and high school. And when they look at that,
Oh, not me.
when they compare it to the actual documents for the
Yeah.
majority of the grades, right? So this is on average what studies have found. So it's
Yeah.
in human nature to there's an actual term for it. I'm blanking on the term right now, but there's a term for it where you are overestimating how good something was in the past.
Probably just like confidence bias or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, when I was in grade school, elementary, I had good grades.
Yeah.
Middle school, good grades. High school, I stopped trying.
Okay. But you did pretty well in the end.
No, I just got by.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of parent-teacher conferences where the teacher's like, he's very smart, but he just doesn't apply himself. He just doesn't care.
Yeah, but in the end, I mean, you're here now. You have a great job. You did well. Alhamdulillah, right?
I mean,
So
eventually
worked
I
out.
started caring again.
Yeah, you had to. But the important thing is that your what? Sorry, words are escaping me. Let's see if we can bring them back.
Because I
got them.
stonewalled you.
Okay, I got them back.
Okay.
When you are in a difficult situation, it's normal to go back to the last time it felt better, and from that practice of going back to the time it felt better, we're overestimating. So it's a good chance that if that relationship were allowed to happen, it probably will not be as good as you think it would. Right? It's a coping mechanism. It's a common coping mechanism. I know it's painful to try to reduce a previous relationship to a coping mechanism, but it's helpful to understand the way that our subconscious works, because then it helps. It's more useful to try to put previous relationships in that context. It's easier to let them go. Like, if you know that I think that I really want to be with that person, that wanting to be with that person is likely a coping mechanism, it becomes easier to let go wanting to be with that person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, like, think about it logically.
Yeah.
The relationship already failed once before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually true. That's a lot of people ask me all the time about on again, off again relationships, right? And again, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this mostly unofficially, like without being paid, since 2018, and we launched our business in March.
Yeah.
So I've only been doing this as an official business since March of this year, but I've been doing this unofficially, coaching clients for a very long time. And there has only been one case where an off again, on again relationship worked. And the only reason that relationship specifically worked is because they were off again due to distance, where an individual had to move, and therefore they broke off the engagement and they lost touch. And then they came back because that distance ended. Yeah. And then they were able to eventually get married. But that was very, very specific, and it was only that one case. Yeah.
The way I rationalize on again and off again relationships, the way I think it won't work is, like, suppose you're at the doorway. Yeah. And I'm here at the back of the room. Yeah. And the only way I can try to move towards you is if you turn on the light. Yeah. So then you turn on the light, I can see, I start walking. You turn off the light, I have to stop walking. Otherwise, what's going to happen? I'm going to hurt myself. Yeah. Right? And so you keep turning on the light, turning off the light. Eventually, I'm going to have too much damage. And it's not going to work out. I'm never going to make it to you. Yeah. But constantly on relationship, you have the light, everything's clear. There's everything's clear. There's no, will she still be there when I'm at the end? Right? Yeah. What is this all for? Yeah, I see what you're saying, but generally I say it's the reasons why people broke up the first time is the same reason they break up the second time, third time, fourth time. That's almost always the case. They don't share the ice cream. You need to trust your judgment the first time around, right? Or trust their judgment the first time around, that if you're incompatible, you're incompatible. But specifically for this sister who is now in this difficult situation, my advice would be to find
a professional that you can sit down with that'll help you to hear each other, right? Because your husband needs to understand what your experience is. You need to understand what his experience is and figure out where the lines of that connection gap exactly are, right? Where his line for what he's comfortable with in terms of connection and emotional intimacy, where it ends and where yours begin. Like, find out how big is that gap, because that's what the incompatibility is. And then through the help of the professional, find ways to mitigate that gap, to come to a point, like if you remember Venn diagrams, find to find that center portion where there is some overlap of what you're comfortable with and he's comfortable with, and that you can find some peace, inshallah. So the advice is to find a professional. It's going to take time to find a professional that you are comfortable with, right? Like, very few people look for a therapist, a counselor, and find the right one off the bat. It usually takes a couple of tries, but it's worth your time. That's how you would fix that problem.
Absolutely. On my end, we bring this back to what I said in an earlier episode, where you don't want to stonewall your partner ever.
Yeah.
At worst, you need to straw wall them. Okay. So that they have it's not a joke.
Okay.
You got a straw wall, right? If you feel the need to stonewall someone and you feel that coming on, you want to remind yourself that you can't use actual stones. You want your partner to be able to get through.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're saying that don't leave room for connection.
Don't be a smart builder.
Okay.
Be dumb. Be a dumb construction man.
Be one of the first two pigs.
Be one of the first two pigs, yes. Decide to go to the market.
Okay.
Don't be there when the wolf comes around. You know, there were 3 pigs, but we have 5 toes. Where were the other 2? They survived because they went shopping. These guys are smart.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I completely lost touch with the analogy, but I like
everyone else except you understood me.
Of course.
You're the outlier. You have to understand this. This was a perfect analogy. You guys get it. Everyone gets it.
It was not a straw man argument.
It was not. Not at all. Not at all.
I got you. But I think, inshallah, hopefully that makes sense. Like, the conclusion for when it comes to being bored in marriage, I'm not sure if we addressed this sufficiently enough. I just really wanted to go through those examples that I think are common in the community. But when you are first married, right, we talked about in the first marriage one, there are 2 things that you have to do in order to lay the foundation for the success of that marriage. First is to establish a healthy conflict resolution routine. And the second, which we didn't really talk about a lot here, but we did a lot there, is to establish support routines. What are the support routines? Are finding a way that the 2 of you can connect regularly, daily, every single day. For us, we went through some of what those examples are. So we make time specifically before we go to sleep at night to recap what the day was like and use that as a moment to connect. Once a week or so, we make time to go out, just the 2 of us, as an opportunity. So these are things that we have to do deliberately and on purpose. It will not happen passively. There's a lot of people who are worried about committing to marriage because of the issue of, what if I'm bored, right? What if I'm bored with my spouse? I don't know if I'll stay with them. Everybody gets bored. All right, everybody. It's like whenever 2 people get married, one of them will need more connection than the other, and that's part of what leads to the boredom, right? That's normal and that's expected. If you expect that will resolve itself passively, it won't. It's actually one of the common reasons for divorce. It will not happen passively. You need to actively address the issue by, number 1, establishing a way to talk about it through the conflict resolution routine, and number 2, establishing those those support habits, those support routines in your marriage. If you are struggling with this, go back please and listen to that second episode, the first year of marriage, and inshallah, hopefully I've outlined much better for over an outline. We outlined much better over an hour of what a lot of examples about support routines look like and how you can start to establish those. But yeah, that's that topic.
So I'm gonna leave you guys with a wonderful practice.
Okay.
What you want to do
Mm-hmm.
to help better your relationships is find novel engagement methods and opportunities with your wife.
Okay.
Otherwise, you want to find Nemo.
Oh God. That was just, you know what? We could use that. That's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. So
Yeah.
just new activities.
Hey, sometimes I speak the truth.
All the time you speak the truth.
There
It's
you go.
just there, but with a lot of puns. It's because of the puns that I knew that we were a match.
There we are.
Yeah. So that's
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, that was clear. If there's anything that didn't make sense, please feel free to ask those questions in the comments, or you can reach out to us at our email, support@zarahassancoaching.com. And you can always find us online on Instagram at Zahra Hassan Coaching. And if you are a Muslim woman who is looking to establish support with other Muslim women about the topics of healthy relationships, feel free to join our Discord with the links down below. I think those are all the things. Oh, and if you have not yet subscribed and you like our content, please subscribe. It really helps out our channel.
Yes, it does.
Yes. I think those are all the things.
That's what's up.
Okay. So Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for your time. Inshallah you benefited, and we will see you again next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.